Hello everyone, my name is Evan Freiberger and this is Tropical Storm Erin. As of right now, our storm is at 50 miles per hour. If we set this satellite in motion, you can see that we definitely do have a lot of spin around this storm. It is getting a little bit better organized. We have more convection as well. You can see we have some pretty cold cloud tops being monitored on the storm right now, meaning that it is strengthening as it pulls over warmer waters. Now, as we look out into the future, it looks like as of right now, the National Hurricane Center is still calling for this thing to eventually recurve to the north. We're still expecting this storm to eventually reach Category 3 strength, 115 miles per hour with 140 mile per hour wind gusts. But I really don't think this cone of uncertainty is really painting the full picture. We have been seeing a couple of shifts to the west. We've been seeing the model's windshield wipe over the last couple of days. But does that necessarily mean that we have a trend? We'll be looking at that today and a lot more as we break down what is possible here with Tropical Storm Erin as it goes throughout the future. But before we get started, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We are on the way to 100,000 subscribers, so hitting that subscribe button will really help us reach that goal. So here's the high definition satellite imagery of Tropical Storm Erin. You can see we have a pretty good outflow on this storm around it. You can tell that by just looking at how some of these clouds are striated around it. We do have a pretty decent inflow as well. A lot of bubbly convection is starting to happen. This storm does seem to be looking healthier and healthier as the days progress. As of right now, our storm is located near the 50 west and 16 north line longitudinally and latitudinally. And if we come over to our sea surface temperatures and find that as well, that's gonna be right around here. So this is kind of the first time it's been really into those 27 degrees Celsius temperatures for a while. So this storm is going to strengthen as it goes further and further to the west. And then look up here, north of Puerto Rico, north of the Dominican Republic, we have 30 degrees Celsius temperatures out here, which means that this storm is probably going to rapidly intensify as we are going to have less dry air and we are going to have more moisture and the shear is going to be a little bit lower. Now, in order to figure out where this storm is going to go, we are going to start to look at a lot of different things on our map here. First, starting off with where our pressures are going to be and what some of our ensembles and, deterministic models are saying in this respect. Here's the GFS run. And as you can see, we are starting off with the high pressure up here in the central Atlantic, low pressure system off of the west of the Antilles. That is Erin, and that will continue off to the west for a pretty decent amount of time. I mean, this thing could get pretty close to the lesser Antilles, the greater Antilles. Might see some larger waves there in Puerto Rico, and then maybe even a close approach to Bermuda. But you can see we have another low pressure system develop up here. The winds around this are going to be going like this, and around this high pressure system, they're going to be going like this, kind of grabbing this system and kind of keeping it off to the west. But as you can see, as this low system interacts with our high pressure system off to the east, you can see that there's a weakness in that high pressure system as this storm tries to ride up to the north. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is a building high pressure system over here in Canada as well. And those winds are going to be moving around the storm just like this. And, if this strengthens and kind of keeps strengthening, we might see this thing still kind of budge to the west. But as you can see, the GFS model still kind of carries us out to sea, even though we are getting some track shifts a little bit further to the south, a little bit further to the west. The recurve is still definitely in play and will most likely be what happens. You can definitely see how all these little dynamics are playing together as this thing moves up to the north. And that's going to dictate the track here. But track kind of means nothing unless you have a good understanding of what the intensity will be. So in order to figure that out, let's hop over here and see what our environment will be like as we move into the future. So here is Erin down here. You can see that as of right now, it's still battling some drier air. So even though it's entering in some warmer waters, it still has some more organization that could happen. But as we move further into the future, by around Saturday, you can see that that dry air really starts to dissipate as this storm approaches the lesser Antilles or the greater Antilles, and it goes just north of there. But you guys could definitely see still some tropical storm force winds potentially, and also some bigger waves and riptides as this makes a close approach. But as you can see, the moisture definitely starts to increase, and our browns here, our dry air, start to decrease. So not only is this storm going to be over well warm warmer waters than it is right now, but that moisture content is going to be increasing and that stable air is going to be on the downfall, meaning that rapid strengthening could certainly occur, but we need to look at one more thing in order to figure out how likely that is. So let's look at our shear environment out there. So as of right now, you can see this high pressure system is causing a decent amount of shear back over on the northern portion of our storm, which has been keeping our convection a little bit further to the south of the storm, but it's starting to wrap around, and further and further away this thing gets from the center of that low pressure, the better the shear environment gets. Now look at this. This dips down to the south here. That's the main shear. This is the shear that the storm itself is causing. Then we have another axis of shear up here, but right here in this little bubble, there's not a whole lot of shear. So not only are we going to have more moisture, less dry air, warmer water temperatures, but our shear environment is also going to be very favorable for rapid strengthening. And then look at this. As soon as that storm hops into that little bubble of no shear, it really starts to intensify, where we start to see a 937. I mean, that could be a category 4 hurricane out in the Atlantic. So we're talking about a very strong hurricane is most likely going to form here. So it's really important to try to nail down where this storm is going to go in the first place. The first tool that I always use is the ensembles to try to get an average of what this thing is going to do in the future. Here you can see our storm approaching the Lesser Antilles. You see how all these members are very close together here? That is showing some pretty high confidence that this is going to go north of the Greater Antilles and north of Puerto Rico. And you can see as we start to move into around the 5-day range, we start to see those spread out. This is a great example and a great visualization of how these models start to lose accuracy as we get into the future. But you can see the mass majority of them are centered here north of the Bahamas, but we do have some hanging down very close to the Bahamas. So if we get anything unexpected, that is still technically a track that could happen. But as of right now, the majority of our averages are up here. So like a 90% chance of it being up somewhere north of the Bahamas by at least a couple of hundred, or about 100 or so miles, maybe a little bit more than that to the north. Then as I push this forward, you can see that the EPS model, even with the members that bring it closer to the Bahamas, bring it all the way out to sea. We already have one model run. I really don't understand why so many people are just, actually I do understand, it's for clicks and money, but you know, so many people are holding on to these one or two very small scenario chances. I do think that a close approach is still possible. You know, if we make a circle at some of these, you know, ensemble members, I mean, we have a good amount of ensemble members that could still bring some tropical depression to tropical storm force winds if the wind field is quite large, which is what we are expecting, in some large waves as well. There are a couple models that are out over there. So that scenario is still, you know, 20-25%, you know, a close approach scenario definitely seems possible. It seems like we can pretty much rule out landfall at this point, but I mean, I'm about 90% confident. So there still is some wiggle room. As I push this forward, you can see that we have a large spread, but it's been so consistent showing the out to sea. I think we really need to stop dropping the phrase that this could actually impact land and more talk about how close to land will it get, because you can still get some impacts out of a storm, even though if it doesn't directly impact you with the center of the storm. Now, when we come over to the GEFS ensemble, you can see we start to see a little bit of a different story, mainly just a couple more members that kind of bring this into land near Florida and South Carolina. But the mass majority of our members are back over here, still out to sea. So maybe a little bit of a higher likelihood of a close approach or a landfall here with the GFS. Landfall probably still around that 2 to 3%, and a close approach probably, you know, somewhere between 20 to 30%, maybe a little bit higher than that, as we do have a lot of members come pretty close to land here. So still got to monitor for those shifts. Again, we're looking about 7 days out, but we are starting to get into that range of accuracy where this models are going to really start to agree on things. And we start to see that when we come over to our ensemble models, or sorry, not our ensemble models, our deterministic models, which is just one model run, not really an average. And they just kind of all give their basic understanding of the storm, and they try to tell you where it's going to go. And as I push this through, close approach to Antilles rapidly strengthens as it goes into that bubble of low shear and very warm waters. And then you can see the Euro does do a close approach, but it's outside of the Carolinas and Virginias. Come over to the GFS, you could bring it back and then show you the same thing. A little bit faster of a storm, a little bit faster of a recurve, also a little bit of a stronger storm as well. But look at this, well out to sea. There's some pretty good agreement there. Let's come over here to the Canadian model. We got all these different countries and their models, and we can use them to kind of paint a picture here of what is possible. You can see that this storm starts to strengthen a little bit later, maybe a little bit weaker of a storm on the Canadian model, but still out to sea. So it doesn't really seem like our intensity is really going to be guiding this storm in any form or fashion. And then the Icon model is pretty interesting, but you can see it also starts to do a recurve. It's a little bit further south than some of our models, but it also tries to do a recurve. So there is agreement of forming on our models for that recurve and for an out to sea storm. The big question I think at right now that we're trying to determine is whether or not it is a close approach, or if this is going to be mainly a problem for like Bermuda, or maybe a problem for really nobody, as it just kind of skirts in between the United States and Bermuda. But as of right now, our models are being pretty consistent. We have about a 90 to 95% chance that this does not make direct landfall, and about a 60 to 70% chance that this storm doesn't go past this line to the west. So given that we're so far out and there still is a little bit of uncertainty, or I would say a decent amount of uncertainty still, at least on that close approach, is there any reason to freak out yet? No, there's no reason to freak out. Nothing on our models are indicating that this is going to make landfall in the United States. Now, does that mean that there's still no chance for a dramatic shift? No, not really. I mean, we've seen it happen before. You know, I think it is still worth being aware of this storm, but please do not panic on this storm. Again, I've been seeing like just massive amounts of misinformation, people latching on to these little 2 to 3% chances and making it seem like it's everything, making it seem like it's the 90% chance. But as you can see, the 90% chance is over here out to sea. So don't panic. Yes, there still is technically a chance that we get a wrench in the forecast and we do see the model shift around. I think it's perfectly fine to think, especially with some of the weather events we've had this year and the uncertainty that we have had, I think it's totally fine to still be aware and to still monitor the storm. But none of our models are saying anything to panic about. This storm isn't just going to shift out of nowhere. There will be a trend that starts to develop. And, you know, to be honest, the trend is a little bit more to the south and a little bit more to the west at this point. But again, we're going to be getting that windshield wiper effect where it's going to be kind of going back and forth, but it's so far been staying in the same range, even though it's been going back and forth, a recurve up to the north, which is why my confidence, at least for now, is pretty dang high that this thing is not going to make direct impact to the United States. Now, not only do we have tropical weather out there, we also have a slight risk for severe weather out over here near Grand Forks, Fargo, just north of Aberdeen, and a marginal risk extending all the way from North Platte up into Minneapolis. And that should eventually get started as we go throughout the day. A lot of those little rain and showers near Sioux Falls will kind of far apart. There could be a redestabilization of our atmosphere. And look at this, a couple of storms could fire by around 9-10 p.m. over there near Grand Forks. If we kind of zoom in and look at the atmosphere here, dew points are up in the 70s, so those aren't going to be a problem. Plenty of moisture, a little bit of lower level winds out there as well. So maybe could make an argument for a tornado chance if we come over to our tornado parameter. Yeah, look at that. A little bit elevated there. Surface-based CIN is right on the line though, so this could inhibit or, you know, stop storms from firing. So it's not a guarantee that we see these storms fire, but if they do, there is going to be a little bit of in a tornadic environment, in a severe weather environment out there. And yeah, we do have some discrete cells out there. So if you live near Grand Forks, Crookston, Three River Falls, be weather aware by around 10 p.m. just in case these storms do fire. By the time they get to Detroit Lake by 2 a.m., they should be falling apart. Going into tomorrow, we have a pretty large marginal risk all the way from Rapid City into Wisconsin. You see that boundary from that storm that came through the northern portion of Minnesota is going to be sinking down to the south, and we're going to be expecting maybe some storms to fire. But as you can see, the HRRR really isn't showing much as we go throughout the day here. So it's going to be a low chance, but if something does fire, we could get some severe weather out of it. Now, in terms of our temperatures over the next couple of days, you can see that it is going to be hot still over here in the Central Plains with potentially 100-degree temperatures, making it all the way up into South Dakota. Still boiling over here in the Pacific Southwest as well. And then back over here into the southeast and the northeast, it's going to be a little bit hot still, but again, nothing like over the top. I mean, we are going to have a little bit of moisture out there, so the heat indexes could be a little bit higher than what these temperatures are saying, but generally we're talking about widespread, 70s, 80s, in some areas reaching into the 90s the further south you go, especially, kind of in this circle. But near the Appalachians, a little bit further to the south and east, could see some cooler air kind of stick around in that area. And going into the next day, you can see things start to cool down, especially up there in the northern Minnesota as that frontal boundary moves through. But for the central United States, you can see that we are still dealing with a decent amount of heat over there into Oklahoma, also Kansas as well, and then back over here into Missouri too, with also some 80s and 90s, a little bit more widespread out over here in the Ohio Valley southeast, and then kind of trying to make it up into the northeast as well. Michigan, Wisconsin are also hanging out into those 80s and 90s, and also honestly a little bit cooler over here in the Pacific Southwest. But I mean, we're still generally talking about 100-degree temperatures out there. Yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in again. I will see you guys probably within another 2 days. We're just spacing it out there every 2 days just because, you know, this storm is still pretty far away. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a major news story as of right now. So there's no need for like rapid updates unless we get some type of crazy shift in the models, which, you know, is technically possible, but it's an extremely low chance, I believe. But, you know, it's always good to just stay weather aware and keep reporting on it. So I'm still reporting on it. It's still there. It's still out there. It's still going to be a very strong hurricane, potentially even a category 4 hurricane. So I will be back, not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow to give you guys yet another update. But there's no reason to be obsessing or worrying about this storm, period. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next forecast. Peace.